Tonight's program is going to consist of a fun mix of book excerpts and a discussion by Jen Watkins. And it will be really entertaining. I had the opportunity to meet her yesterday and talk with her a little bit. She's a lot of fun. I started reading her book last week and I'm already completely hooked. So if you haven't had a chance to check it out for yourself, I really absolutely encourage you to do so. It's a great book. Okay, and now the moment you've all been waiting for. I would like to introduce author Jen Watkins. She's got a very interesting background, having worked at LANL for 12 years as a computational social scientist who modeled human behavior. And then looking for new changes, she and her partner decided to leave their jobs, buy a sailboat, and spend 18 months on a sailing adventure that took them up into British Columbia during the winter and through Pacific Mexico during hurricane season. Jen, I have to assume that chapter of your life was a real nail biter for all of your loved ones.
Indeed it was.
Yeah, I can imagine. We're all glad that you got back safe. Along the way, she dodged crab pots and tanker ships, swam with a sea lion colony, raised pods of dolphins, and even learned to whip up a mean banana bread while healing at 20 degrees. All of the stuff that provides great fodder for writing, I'm sure. Exactly. And then after making it safely back home to New Mexico and dedicating herself to writing as a career, she received an initial flurry of attention that made her think writing was going to be easy. But then the manuscript wasn't picked up by anyone. Sounds like that was a humbling experience. And she spent a couple of years learning the craft of writing and storytelling and the business of being an author before her completely rewritten manuscript for So Pipe the Young was published. And again, just from what I can tell so far, it seems like a really polished book, and I think it's great. And I can't wait to see what else you come up with. I know that So Pipe the Young is actually the first novel in a 4-part series entitled Dark Season. So we do have lots more stuff coming from you.
Yep.
Yeah, that'll be great. The second book in the series, it sounds like, is going to be about a group of aspiring writers who visit a snowboarding retreat and then end up turning to the occult in the hopes of getting their manuscripts published. I already love that. So, but yeah, I think from what I understand, you don't want to provide a release date yet, right? Because you don't want to jinx it.
Exactly.
Yeah, good. Well, I think that's enough from me. I'd like to turn it over to you now. I know you've got a presentation for us tonight, and I know we're all looking forward to that.
Okay, let me share the screen. Okay, can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Thanks very much, Jessica, for your introduction. I'm really excited to do this. This is my my first book, and this is my very first author event. So thank you guys for coming. What I'm going to talk about today is how I veered away from the career I had at the lab. I moved from Michigan right after college to New Mexico to work at the lab. That was my only job up until when we left to go sailing, and I decided I was going to become a writer. So I'm going to tell you about the journey. It wasn't metaphorical. It was an actual 5,000-mile journey that sort of transitioned me away from what I was doing at the lab into being a writer. I'm going to talk, I think it'd be interesting to say, just I've learned so much about writing in the past 2 years. So I'll talk to you about my writing process and also the publishing process, because it's pretty interesting. It's not the way it is in the movies. And of course, I'll talk about the book and I'll do some reading. Okay, the journey wasn't metaphorical. There she is. This was my 40-foot steel sailboat. You can see on the bow there's a fish he's smoking a pipe that has bubbles coming out of it, and he's wearing a deer stalker cap. The name of the boat was the Red Herring. So I think even before we left, I had in mind that I wanted to do a little mystery writing. And I will save you the suspense. I'm talking in the past tense because we sold the boat, not because we shipwrecked. So here's a picture of me in my happy place. For those 18 months, I really like to be at the helm steering my boat. This was our journey. So I left the lab in September, and we didn't own a boat. And we were scouring the earth online, looking for our perfect vessel. and we ended up finding her in Port Townsend, Washington, which is basically by Seattle. But it was November, and so instead of being in a tropical place to live on a sailboat, we were in the cold and in the dark. We made the best of it, and we decided we were going to make a run for Alaska. And so all this, let me see if I can, yeah, okay. All this mess here, when you zoom in, is pictures of all of our anchorages as we tried to move our way up. So Alaska is up here. We did not make it. It ended up just being too cold, and the days were so short in the middle of the winter that we didn't have much time to sail. So we circumnavigated Vancouver Island, and then eventually we went south. Okay, I'm zooming in on the map. This is Washington. Seattle, you might be able to see here. This is where we bought the boat. Vancouver's up here. This is Vancouver Island. I'm zooming in because I want to show you the exact place where I decided to sit down and start writing. The cool thing about being on a trip like this, where literally every night I was sleeping in a new anchorage, is that the whole story of those years is so set in a specific location that I can remember the exact moment when I wrote and where we were, what I was doing. So this is the same zoom in. This is the San Juan Islands. It's a very remote part of Washington, but then it's also kind of swanky. Like Oprah has a house on Orcas Island. And if you remember Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, when they escaped the UK and they spent that Christmas at a mansion on Vancouver Island, that was on this peninsula. We weren't there at the same time. But anyway, the Star is where I started writing. It was on Galiano Island in the Gulf Islands. It's a place called Montague Harbor. And just in case that first picture of me behind the helm gave you the wrong idea, this is what it looked like. The water was black. There was lots of mist and fog. That's snow in the background. You can understand why I might have started writing dark stories. And I couldn't help myself. I had to put a picture of the author contemplating out the rainy window. Okay, so this is it. This is the exact moment. It was caught on film. I was freezing cold. I was sitting up on the counter in our boat, wearing a scarf and 2 hats next to our diesel heater. And you can see my laptop, a little Apple thing there, where I decided, you know what, I'm going to sit down and start writing. And basically I didn't stop. So at night, I would do that. And at this far north in the winter, night starts at 4. So I would start writing then. But during the day, this is what we were up to. It was outdoor. We would be sort of like weather beaten, and you don't see the sunshine very much, and pretty physical. I'm wearing PVC gloves because the lines are wet, and you can't get your hands wet all day. So I don't know, it was a pretty crazy time. Okay, so this is my very first sentence. I was starting off with my literary devices going strong. I was trying to write a romance novel called Clever Girl. So it says, it wasn't until she was on her hands and knees on the kitchen floor that she began to wonder what she had gotten herself into. Addie was flexing her measuring tape in and out. So I was working the double entendre from my very first sentence. Okay, eventually we headed south. Again, we were there at the completely wrong time. I would read these guidebooks, and they would say, oh, try and find a place to anchor away from all the other boats. And every anchorage we went to was completely empty because it was wintertime. No one's as dumb as we were out in Vancouver sailing. And so then we decided, okay, fine, we're going down to Mexico. It's gonna be warm. But we were there in the incredible heat and during hurricane season. So once again, every single anchorage in these beautiful places was just completely empty. There's the red herring. There's no one here. And there's no one here because it was hot and it was hurricane season. But even still, even in the tropics, I wear a blanket to write. I don't know. It's what I do. So if you're interested in following more of our story, we have a website, svredherring.com. And when you zoom in, you see these little icons. You click on the icon and you get sort of like little blog entries. There's 4 photos in this particular one, and a little story of what was happening while we were there. So SV stands for sailing vessel, so svredherring.com. Okay, so eventually we decided we were done with the sailing life and we left our aqueous existence, and we moved home to New Mexico. I live just down the hill from you guys in Milwaukee Valley. I live on a little piece of land where we grow food every season. This is a picture of our morning glories taking over our corn. And if you've seen my author photo, you know I love chickens. This is our latest round of chickens. Our power had gone out, so we rigged up a little place to keep them warm in front of the fire. In my author photo, I'm holding a rooster, and that's this guy, Punky Rooster. At this time, we thought he was still a hen. Okay, so my writing desk. This is my actual writing desk, the place from which I'm talking to you right now. It felt so different to leave the boat and come home and have an actual monitor and a keyboard and a place I could set my tea without it sliding off the counter. And I thought, oh, if I could write on a boat in an actual, office, I can write super well. So I felt very energized and like, okay, I'm going to do this. My plan was the dark seasons. Still is a plan. I have 4 stories planned. They're all different characters, but they're united by the idea that people who have incautiously chosen the rural life suffer tragically. That is definitely what happens in the first one, So Bright the Young, that we're talking about tonight. This one's set in the spring. They all have different genres, a little bit different genres. So one is a Gothic thriller. That's what this one is. The book, The Rules of Writing, about the writers who turn to the occult that Jessica was talking about. That suspense takes place in winter, and then I have an outline for a mystery in the fall, and then a cozy murder coming up for summer. Okay, it looks like stock photos, but this is actually one of my apricot trees in my orchard. This is my field with some water coming down. I think you can barely see one of my chickens free ranging out here. My dog's up there. That is a stock photo. But what I'm presenting to you is I got home, it was April, and it's National November Writing Month, NaNoWriMo, if you guys are familiar with that word. People write 1,667 words a day. And at the end of the month of November, that gives you a 50,000 word novel. So I decided I was going to write 2,000 words a day. And at the end of that, I would have a 60,000 word novel. So to put that in perspective, So Bright the Young is an 80,000 word novel now. Most novels are around that range, like a Stephen King or a fantasy novel is maybe 120,000 words. Some romance novels are maybe down at 50 or 60, but 80 is really sort of like industry standard that you're shooting for. So I thought, okay, I can do 60,000 words and then fill it out in round 2. And I did. I wrote 2,000 words a day. At the end, I had 60,000 word novel, and I thought, this is easy. So I was very confident. I thought after sailing all over, like I can do anything. So I went to the publishing process. I thought, this is so easy. The plan was to, 1, query literary agents. 2, my agent will sell my book to a big 5 publisher, obviously, profit. I wasn't exactly sure what happens in between there, but then I'm going to be fed at all sorts of parties with champagne, and people are going to say how wonderful I am. It went somewhat different from that. So querying literary agents, I had this idea, possibly from the movies, that you print out your manuscript, you tuck it into a manila envelope with a passel of stamps and some New York address, and you clutch it to your chest and then put it in the mail, and you wait a week, and then you get your self-addressed stamped envelope with your manuscript right on back if they don't like it, so you can send it off to someone else. But the truth is much less romantic. You just send an email. You just say, like, dear lit lady, I think you'd like my book, and you just paste in the first 5 pages of your book and you wait. But once again, the gods were shining on me, and I learned as soon as I thought I had my manuscript ready to go and I was ready to query, about this program called Pitch Madness. It's awesome. It's a group of people, writers mostly, who help you assemble your query letter and your package to send off to the agents. But what they do 4 times a year is on Twitter, they have this event called Pit Mad, which is short for Pit Madness. And what you do is you, in 280 characters, write a pitch for your book, and literary agents go to Twitter and they just sort of like bask in the flow of people posting their short examples. And if the agents like it, all they have to do is like it on Twitter, and then you send them your query. It seems like just the same thing, but more work, except that you can write in the letter now, dear lit lady, you liked my tweet, here it is. I think you're really gonna like the full book. And it helps you like rise up the slush pile, as they call it. So PitMad happened like right when I was ready for it. And if you're interested, this was my pitch, my 280 characters. After a murder at her son's school leaves him traumatized, robotics engineer Annabelle Granger must set aside her aspirations for the perfect family before her son falls prey to the darkness gathering in him. And then hashtag PitMad so they can see it. The A stands for adult, the LF for literary fiction, and the T for thriller to help the agents know what they're getting. So I had 5 agents like my tweet. This was actually pretty incredible. It's a lot of people don't have anyone like it. So I thought, again, this is so easy. Pretty soon, step 2 is coming. But it did not happen that way. After it goes days, and then it goes weeks, and then it goes months. This is an actual screenshot of my just epic Excel spreadsheet I have of all the agents. What you do research on all of them. What is it they like? How should you talk to them? And then I would switch it red when I found out that I had a rejection from them. So there's a whole bunch of red. The weird thing about how it works is sometimes they'll actually send you a letter saying, it's not right for us. Sometimes they'll do something like say, if you haven't heard from us in 6 weeks, then consider it a no. But a lot of times you just don't ever hear from them. So this is for So Pipe the Young, and I've still got ones that are yellow, meaning maybe they're about to read So Pipe the Young and, can't wait to publish it. It's a very strange system. Okay, so I regrouped. I decided I would start small, very small. Since I had some success on Twitter, I went back to Twitter, and they have all kinds of writing exercises you can do on Twitter. Some people post a word like screech, and they say like write a poem or write some short 280 characters using this word, and you have a new word every day, and it kind of like gets the juices flowing and gets you talking to people. So I started writing poems. This one, the fisherman tale of a sailor named Hazy. Obviously, I was stuck still on the sailing topic. I would also participate in ones that are true story, where you write these mini memoirs that you try and fit into. It makes you a very concise writer when you have to get the whole story into a tweet. So again, this was a true story about us outrunning a hurricane on the way to Puerto Vallarta. So I still had sailing in my system. Finally, I decided, okay, a little bit bigger. I wrote a short story, and I'll read you the blurb. The air is running out. Her husband isn't responding. In the future, instead of buying yachts, so still sailing, wealthy retired couples buy spaceships and launch into the unknown on a one-way adventure. From Earth, it seems a romantic voyage. The reality is much harsher. Those first months, the challenge was simply to stay positive in an isolated and cramped environment. But the crises are mounting, and Rosalind wonders why she's fighting so hard to stay alive, because no situation is hopeless. Okay, so still boat theme, but I was doing a lot of writing, and so it was feeling good. And I actually ended up getting this just published as like a 99-cent ebook on Amazon. So that was getting me going. Okay, I finally figured out what it is that agents and publishers want. And what they want is a sure thing. So if you can show that you have fans already for your first book, which seems like just for your first book, how do you have a fan? Well, you have them by writing many other stories that are smaller or less ambitious in scope than the actual manuscript that you're trying to get them to buy. So I began having a web presence, which is really the antithesis of how I normally am. I have a book club, a Goodreads, and a Facebook, and you're welcome to join me there if you want. And I also have a newsletter. If you sign up for the newsletter, you have to have a gift to give people when they sign up for a newsletter. So my gift is Return to Sharp Key. It's choose your own adventure is a trademarked term, but you would be forgiven for thinking it was a choose your own adventure. It's actually a click wisely adventure. It's an ebook. And when you get to the end of the chapter where you make, your hero can go left or your hero can go right, there's a link and it takes you directly to the next chapter. Okay, the book. Oh yeah, interlude. So my book came out in May of 2021. It was the pandemic. There was no such thing as the stack of books and the book signing. So instead I have stickers somewhere. Stickers, they look like that. If you buy the book and you'd like to have a signed copy of the book, you can email me and tell me what you want it to say, and I will mail you a sticker, and it fits right on the title page, right there. So it feels like you do have a personally signed book, but I just never touched your actual book. So send me an email if that's what you'd like to have. Oh! In the wild. Thank you very much. It happens for real. Okay. So strangely, I wrote this book before the pandemic started, but it has a lot of parallels to what was going on during our quarantine time. This is from my publisher. Domestic thriller Soap Opera Young pits suburban family against the rural Southwest. Quarantine, work from home policies, and fear of crowds during the pandemic have led many suburban professional families to consider where else in the country they might live. I know I was just listening to a podcast, and there's a reporter maybe who moved from New York to Connecticut, to like a rural farm area, and he got Lyme disease. And it's like, oh, it's happening to everyone. Terrible things when you move rurally. In this domestic suspense novel, robotics engineer Annabelle Granger learns that her expectations regarding the simple country life do not match the harsh reality. And I've seen that again and again in news of mostly New Yorkers who decided they were going to abandon the city and move somewhere else and hated it. So, okay. The reading. Let me see what I've got on time. We're good. So the main character, what I'm going to do before I jump into the reading is tell you some of the story so you're not lost as I'm reading it to you. When I was writing the book, I was using Pinterest. So I'm sharing with you my Pinterest photos. So sometimes things align like scary well with what happens in the book. And it goes reverse. The pictures came first and then I wrote the book. So yes, she has Annabelle Granger. She's our main character. She has really lovely red hair, and she lives in Royal Oak, Michigan, where the little star is. And she is a robotics engineer. She calibrates surgical robots like the one you see in the picture. But she is also an accomplished oil painter. She likes to copy the style of the 18th century Dutch masters. She gave up the oil painting that she was doing in college for her STEM career, and she kind of regrets it in a way. She was particularly attracted to the type of painting called vanitas. You might be familiar with these paintings. They're still lifes. They usually feature things that are important to the person who bought the painting, but they also feature things that represent fleetingness. So there's flowers because they die. There's what is that called? The sand timer, because the sands of time are running out. A candle that's about to go out. But there's always a skull. And I think they're so cool. I just love that the skull is so creepy in a way amongst the normal things that you would have on a table. So Annabelle thinks that too. I'm going to read over here the quote. This is a quote from the book. Annabelle liked to consider what collection of artifacts she would place in an artful grouping to represent her life. She saw her diplomas, her oil paints in their wooden box, the blusher veil from her wedding, Heath's baby booty knitted by her mom to resemble a smiling frog, and a high-torque digital servo. Then in her mind's eye, she would add to her personal grouping a skull, because no matter who you are, no matter what fantastic objects you possess, death shall come for you too. Think about that. Okay, so that's where Annabelle's head is. Just for fun, I'm including a modern vanitas. You can see like the fleeting pleasures, and then the artist has tucked in a skull. It's memento mori is the term. Remember that you too shall die. Okay, more art history. This is a painting. It's a famous painting, The Ambassadors. You might recognize it, featuring these, gentlemen amongst their tools that they need. And then down here, this white blob is actually a skull. It doesn't look like a skull when you see it front on, but if you turn the painting, there is a view at which that is a perfectly drawn skull. And this is from 1533. I just love that they were, I don't know, that weird and creepy back in 1533. Okay, here's another famous painting. You should know that Annabelle is trying to conceive her second child. She's visiting a fertility clinic. And in the fertility clinic, this painting is hanging on the wall. She thinks it's hanging on there because people think that this woman is pregnant. But Annabelle knows better. She's just holding all this skirting up. This painting is famous, by the way, because they think that it's the artist who is reflected in the mirror back here. They with all their tools, they're able to zoom in super closely and see that this is a well-represented third person between this couple. Okay, the style, just last one. The style that she likes to do is copying Vermeer. If you've seen the movie Tim's Vermeer, he has this very mathematical way of painting, but the result is, all these sumptuous details like what's in here. And it's always by a sunny window. So I can't show you Annabelle's paintings because I made them up, but when you're reading the book, think something like this. Okay, Heath has a son, a 5-year-old little red-haired baby. His name is Heath Granger. She has a husband, Paul. He's a PhD management consultant who travels a lot for work. Annabelle works in an environment like this. It's super sterile, very high tech, but what she dreams of is the pastoral life. She would put this picture on her Pinterest page. Okay, so I'm going to read to you from chapter 4, but the book opens with, because she thinks about death, because she thinks about moving to the country, because she is struggling to conceive a second child. For whatever reason, she's thinking of having an affair with her coworker and underling, Tim. And she is, in a very clunky way, trying to initiate that with this email. Tim, have you ever thought of doing something irresponsible like having an affair? Let me know. So she's waffling about whether she should send this email or not. Okay, so I'm going to read to you. I'm at the point of my life where I need reading glasses. From chapter 4. So in this chapter, she is trying to convince her husband, Paul, that it's time to shuck everything they have and move to the country. That evening, as they sat on their bed amongst the clean laundry, mating socks, and watching Game of Thrones, Annabelle proposed moving to the country to Paul. Paul? Yes, my dear, I'm not happy. Paul stopped mating. I don't want to go to the fertility treatments. I don't want to work at the lab anymore. I think we should move to the country. You could give up your consulting and I'll be a full-time mom. Paul didn't say anything, so Annabelle continued. I need something different than this. What's this? Paul asked, mimicking her sweeping hand gesture. Royal Oak. This was a big admission. Royal Oak was Paul's idea of heaven. If Dorothy clicked her heels and thought of Kansas, Paul closed his seat-back tray table and thought of Royal Oak. It was in Paul's final wishes that he be buried there, because there's no place like home. This is it, Paul said. This is the life. We're winning. We live in a nice, comfortable house on a safe street in a good school district. Our families are nearby. We both have well-respected and well-paying jobs, and we are all healthy. That's all there is. All there is. What about flourishing? What about striving to be something more than the perfect employee? What about meaning, purpose, passion? What about nature? Yes, our lives are safe and comfortable, but they are also trite and colorless. I am a consumerist worker bee drone, and I don't know how to change that here. She moved her hand towards his on the bed and continued, let's escape. Let's move to the country. I don't even recognize myself anymore. No, Annabelle, that's my line. I don't recognize you. The country? We're living the life we've always worked for. They sat on the bed next to each other, but facing the TV. It was easier to have this conversation turned away. It's what we wanted, remember? Little house on the prairie, she said. He pulled his arm away to roll a pair of socks. Have you ever seen Little House on the Prairie? death in childbirth, drowning in the pond, going bust. Those were hard scrabbles, sad lives. Country living is not for you. Hey, Buster, Annabelle retorted, pointing a finger at his shoulder. Don't you tell me what I can and can't do. Was I the only woman chosen for Dr. Watanabe's robotics program? Yes. Did I earn his respect and did he write me a recommendation to the lab? Yes. And did I become the youngest team leader there even after taking maternity leave? Yes, I did. Don't you start bounding my reality, mister. Annabelle, yes. Paul scooched toward her on the bed, knocking over a tower of Heath's folded t-shirts. He put his hands on her shoulders and kissed her forehead. You are a determined woman with brains, chutzpah, and fortitude. I have no doubt you could goad nature into producing a bountiful harvest for the family. But the reason you took the internship and became team leader is because you have a passion for the work. You don't have to wrench your back in the garden. Let's not kid ourselves, Paul. You know, if they would let me build a calibrating robot to save me the tedium of my job, I would. I don't build robots, I am one. I sacrifice passion for the paycheck, and choosing to work in a garden is different from having to work in a garden. Annabelle let a silence settle over them before trying again. We don't enjoy the fruits of our labor. We are not even raising our own child. We pay for someone else to raise him so I can go to work to earn the money to pay someone to raise him. This world is insane. We order our groceries, we bank online, we get Heath's toys by subscription. All this convenience freeing us up to do what? I'm not working on my magnum opus, are you? Paul furrowed his brow. She continued, do you know what I do with my extra time? I research parabens and palm oil and eliminate them from our household. I determine which gas station has caused the least unrest in the Middle East. I order ethically sourced cocoa and organic yoga wear. These are not sources of accomplishment. These are empty gestures. I hear you. You're unhappy, and that makes me unhappy. I just don't think abandoning all we've worked for is the solution you think it is, Paul said. It irked Annabelle that not even a hint of panic inflected his voice. Annabelle had dreamt of trading in suburbia for a pastoral life when she was pregnant with Heath. Children were meant to be raised on farms. Every nursery rhyme Annabelle encountered as she decorated and stocked their buttercream yellow nursery in anticipation of Heath's arrival told her so. Duck, duck, goose, counting sheep, eating curds and whey, farmers in dells, buying black sheep, cockadoodle doing roosters, Jack and Jill and their lack of indoor plumbing. One Mary could be asked how her garden grew, and another Mary didn't have a kitten or a hamster, she had a little lamb. In fact, the more baby books she had read, the more convinced Annabelle became that children should be left in charge of sheep. Little boy Blue slept under a haystack. Good luck finding one of those in the city park, while his sheep were in the meadow. And poor little Bo Peep lost her sheep and didn't know where to find them. Children are meant to be raised on farms, she said. You've got a fairy tale view of country life, Paul said, as if he'd read her mind. And your view is that they're all gun-toting, Bible-thumping, uncultured hicks. No, that's not true. But I do think in the country, our neighbors would be people who still spank their kids, who don't neuter their dogs. They'd think healthy eating means buying the low-fat box of Cheez-Its. These places are stressed out. There's addiction, a lack of social services, and a depressed economy. The mill closed, or the plant, or the mine. The schools are underfunded. It's just a different mindset. Annabelle followed Paul's eyes to the unclothed women filling the TV screen as Game of Thrones transitioned to a harem scene. Just when she thought she'd lost his attention, he pulled out the trump card. Annabelle, think about Heath. He's happy. He just started in kindergarten. He's making friends. He's growing up in a safe and privileged neighborhood. Those country kids wish they could be so lucky. The matter rested. Okay. Thank you. So we know it's not a spoiler to say that the family ends up moving to New Mexico. So even though this first attempt went super poorly, they end up moving to New Mexico. So I'm going to do another quick reading. I think, well, maybe I'll skip this one. I will skip this one, so we have time for questions. But suffice it to say, they end up, something happens and they end up being able to move to the country. They end up moving to Box Elder, New Mexico, which is a made up place. I have it set somewhere along the Turquoise Trail. It's very similar to the place I live down the hill from you guys. She lives in an adobe house. She has a garden, and she ends up taking over the previous owner's old deaf dog named Maud. And she gets her own real life experience with a memento mori. Thank you for your attention. This is really exciting for me. I really appreciate you guys being here. Last page, again, if you want a signature sticker, email me. I'm yo@jenwatkins.com. If you want the free book, sign up for my newsletter. You can sign up at the bottom of the page on my website, jenwatkins.com. Or if you're a book bubber or a good reader or a Facebooker, you can find me on those places too. Okay, questions. I would love to hear questions.
Jen, I just wanted to say really quick that I did share those links you were referring to in the chat box.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, so her newsletter sign up is there. I have a link to where you can purchase the book. And there's lots of other stuff there as well. So go ahead and pull the links out of there if anyone's interested in those.
Cool. Yeah. I've made a little reader's guide for book club people. If you want to do a book club with the book, there's questions that you could ask. And if you want to, I could zoom in and join your book club discussion. I think that would be super fun.
Oh, that's great, Jen. I shared that as well. So that's a PDF up in the chat box too. And I did take a look at that. That was actually really interesting.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So everyone download it and then go buy the book.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, everyone. So don't forget, if you don't want to be shown in the recording, then feel free to type questions into the chat box. And Jen, I've got lots of questions here for you. If anyone else has questions, just go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll call on you to speak directly to Jen if you'd like. So Jen, I have a question because I do know a little bit about this, but I haven't gotten the full picture. Where does the title "So Pipe the Young" come from? And I do know that this has something to do with the painting, and I know that's pictured on the cover of your book. So maybe you could hold that up for people and just talk a little bit about this, because I know it's really interesting.
Okay, so the cover of the book has it's an old painting. It's called "As the Old Sing, So Pipe the Young." Just like Annabelle was in love with the old masters, I think I have a replication of it. That's the actual painting. Let's see if we can see it. And really, it's an allegory. "As the old sing, so pipe the young" means when whatever you're modeling to your children is the way they're going to turn out. And in this painting from 1668, they have children hanging out with their parents around a table. You can see they're drinking. There's sort of like general bodiness going on. And in particular, there's this child, and he's playing an instrument of some kind, and he's looking straight at the viewer. And it's a little creepy. And he's on the cover, if you can see, he's looking straight out at the viewer after all this like debauchery that's going on in the middle. So the title comes from the idea that her son Heath is picking up on all kinds of the vibes that are going on, both off of her parents, because the unhappiness that Annabelle's feeling, the jostling of moving to a new place, and then what he experiences with the new people he meets in Box Elder.
Got it. Okay, thank you. I thought that was fascinating when I read a little bit about how you named the book, and just kind of drawing on this theme of old paintings coming through the story. I think it's pretty neat. Barbara has a question for you. She says, "I enjoyed reading your book, but was curious whether any of it is based on your personal experience."
Yeah, okay, this is the question everyone has for me. It is. It's been funny to have people who I know read the book. So my neighbor read the book, and I was coming home from a walk at the river, And he said, "Did you see any kids down there?" And I realized he was referencing what happens in the story is that the kids are playing at the river. And it just was like, oh my God, like, yes, in some ways, the scenes of the book are scenes that I have experienced, or she learns what an arroyo is the hard way. She learns that when you call it the river, there's no water in it. I don't know. Some of these things are definitely my experience. She moves from Michigan to New Mexico. I moved from Michigan to New Mexico. She had a technical job and she dreams of a more arty job, which is sort of mirroring what I did. So it's more, on the other hand, I'm not married and I don't have a child. So all that marriage stuff, all the motherhood stuff, made up whole cloth. Obviously the more horrific stuff completely made up. But I would say it's more like a dream, like you recognize the places, but none of it makes sense. So yes, a lot of the places are I could stand and tell you, this is where I was thinking this scene was happening when I was writing it. It's a real place, but I don't mean for it to be that place. It's just kind of, as I was writing, I was thinking of cottonwood trees, a particular place came to mind. So I wouldn't have been able to write the book about New Mexico and the specific things that you experience in New Mexico if I wasn't a New Mexican. I would put it like that.
Okay. Yeah, Barb, thank you for asking that question. I was wondering it myself. And I know from the portions of the book that I have read so far, I mean, you just go into such great detail that it really does feel like this is lived experience for you. So done a great job. Shan has a question for you. How long did it take to write the book? Also, how long between when you finished and when it was published? And thank you for sharing your experiences.
Oh, cool. Thanks, Jen. So as I said, I wrote when I was on the boat, I wrote a manuscript. I came home, that was my goal. I'm going to come home with a finished book. And I got home and I had like my desk and I had the internet. And all of a sudden I thought, oh, this book that I wrote, no good. So I spent a couple months, I took classes, I was reading everything I could about really like, how do you craft a novel? Like just the bare bone stuff of like, when do you know to start a new chapter? But then also like, how do you have themes? How do you introduce characters? Just everything about how do you write. I have always liked to write, but I've never written a book. I've read many, many books. I have sort of absorbed things, but I didn't really know. And that first manuscript, it shows. So I decided, start over. And by the way, that first manuscript is actually this book that will be the winter story about the writers in the winter who turned to the occult. So it's going to have a new life. But I decided I'm going to start fresh. I'll start with spring. It was springtime. Let's write the spring story. I wrote it in the first draft in a month. And then I did basically what I wanted to be the final draft in another month. And then spent a couple weeks sort of like ruminating on what this book, what it was I had written so that I could write query letters and start talking about it, because it still felt really close to me and it hadn't like really separated off from me. But that's when I started doing the Pit Mad thing. So over that summer, so I wrote it in April, sort of finished it in June. Over that summer, people started saying, like it, but we don't want it, that kind of thing. I then started joining like writing communities, and I had beta readers. I had people that were commenting on just chapters at a time. I was reading other people's work and commenting on their stuff. And I really took another step up, I think, in my ability to see my work as separate from just like, oh, the things in my soul. And I could like actually analyze it as a piece of writing. So that was huge. And I started rewriting it. And I rewrote the whole thing, like start from a blank page twice over the next year. And but during that time, as I said, I was writing other small pieces of work and trying to get a little hustle going in the writing community, get people following me, get a little bit more just professional about how, saying I am a writer as opposed to saying like, oh, I write code. That's what it said everywhere on the internet is I'm a programmer. And so I had to change everything and in some ways adopt the persona. And so no, I do not have an agent, and it was not a big 5 publisher that picked me up. It's a local press. I did not get an advance. I get paid, when a book sells, I get paid a portion of that. But it's okay because my book is out there and people are reading it, and it's my first step. So basically, I got home in 2019 and my book was published in May of 2021.
Got it. Yeah, I think it's a big ask to ask someone to take the time to read your book, and I feel like for everyone here tonight, I mean, if you love this sort of genre, this is really just, Jen, I just love your work so far. And I can see having like your full series of the Dark Season series finished and gifting that to people to like binge read,
Yeah.
It's like get off the Netflix and just read all of these books. I just love this genre, and it's just really fun to meet like a young emerging local author who's doing such a good job already. So
thank you very much.
Yeah, it's inspiring. Okay, so John would like to know, you say that the dark idea came from sailing, but what do you mean about the books being dark?
Okay, John's my dad. Hi, Dad.
Thank you for coming, Jen's dad. And Mom,
So I was explaining earlier to Olivia that she doesn't like thrillers necessarily, and my book can be a little bit deceiving because you can read well into the book until you start really feeling like this is anything more than sort of like domestic drama. It's not like all happy things that are happening, but it's not like horrifying. But at the you begin to slowly understand that things aren't as they seem. Uh-oh, can people still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That things aren't exactly what they seem. And her moment of realization happens very quickly. And so it moves from sort of domestic drama to, things are actually really in a bad place quickly.
We've all been there, right? It sounds
right.
Relatable.
True to life.
Jen, I was wondering if you could talk just a little bit about kind of that process of becoming an author in terms of, obviously becoming an author was a right turn in your career. How do you learn about writing, querying and publishing? I mean, it sounds like you were really resourceful, and I'm sure some of us would really love to hear more about that.
Well, so much like Annabelle in the story, I love nothing more than internet research. So you can learn absolutely everything there is to know on the internet without ever having to put on real pants. And so as soon as I had a question, I just figured out once I know what the question is, then I can search and I can find some good resources. It is true that it helps enormously to have people who are in the business to give you some help. And so joining a writing group, I joined, this was also during the pandemic, so I joined an online writing group called Inked Voices. And it's sort of a website, and you can jump onto all kinds of different writing groups. People who only want to read a chapter at a time, people who will sit and read your whole book and give you amazing comments. They have people of all different experience levels, people who are just starting, people who are published authors. And it makes a huge difference instead of spending 4 hours reading, whatever sketchy information I find online, to have an actual person I can ask, hey, what do you think about this piece of writing? What do you think about this query? How should I handle this where I'm stuck in the story? What should I do? Even if they just send me a link, then I know exactly, that this is a good advice that's here. So definitely a mix between having ready access to the internet and having some actual people to help me. That's how it worked.
Great. All right. Well, I think we've got one more question here in the chat box. It's from Brent, and Brent would like to know
Brent.
what did you like most about the writing experience?
It's a little odd because I absolutely hate writing in a way. The time I spend writing is like terrible. I don't know. I wait for it to be done. I hope I get my words in, but there's also something that when I'm not doing it, I'm thinking that I want to be doing it. I'm thinking about the story. And it's a challenge for me in a way that other things aren't a challenge. I really feel like up against myself when I'm sitting down and have to write a scene and pulling together the whole story and making it make sense and say the thing that I want it to say at the sentence level, at the chapter level, and then for the whole story. That's like a major mission and a thing I can get behind. And it's also very personal. It's not like a lot of teamwork involved in it. So I like just having that almost like inner battle with myself that, okay, now I have to say what I'm really, really, really trying to say. And sometimes it's very, I don't know, it's like analytical how I apply it. And sometimes it just happens magically. And both ways are good. But man, while it was happening, I would not say I enjoyed it all.
That's interesting. Thank you. All right. Well, it looks like it's 8 o'clock. So, and I think everyone got their questions asked. So I think we can go ahead and wrap it up. But Jen, I just want to say thank you so much for the great presentation tonight. It was a lot of fun having you. Jen, we wish you the best of luck with book sales on So Pipe the Young. And then of course, best of luck getting that next novel out so that we can all check that one out too.
Thank you very much for hosting this. This has been wonderful. And thank you for coming. Thanks, Jessica.
Yeah.
And thanks, Olivia, for tech support. And yeah, really, thank you for coming. This has been so wonderful.
Glad you enjoyed it, Jen. We'll connect soon. This